Hello all, welcome back to Words and Pictures for one of the monthly Sunday swatching sessions, and you're joining me at the end of a huge swatching job. I have indulged myself in the final 3 sets, well the second 3 sets, to create a total of 6 sets of Tim Holtz Ranger Distress Watercolor Pencils. I think they're fantastic tools. I'll talk about them as we go along. And yeah, when I had the first 3 sets, I had them arranged in colour order rather than in the sets they came in. But when the second 3 sets came out, I realised I was going to have to completely rearrange and reinsert the new colours into my rainbow. And so I decided I would do some full-on swatching. So what I did first of all was pull out each set in turn so that I could see the sets as they came. So in this little watercolour book, I've got Distress Watercolor Pencils set 1, which has got lots of the real sort of basics in, including the white and the black. Yes, you can't really see picket fence going on there. So Distress Watercolor Pencils set 2, I pulled out to look at as a group. Distress Watercolor Pencils set 3, and what you'll notice, this is with the addition of Scorched Timber, which is an extra, is that these have been really carefully curated release by release to give you basically a rainbow in each set of the Distress Watercolor palette. It's 72 colours in total, plus picket fence, the white. But each set, as it's sold, gives you, as you can see, a really good mixing palette. So that was the first 3 sets, which I had already put into order. So I pulled those out again in order to paint them as sets to see them. And then the new sets, watercolours set 4, that's the pencil set 4, set 5, really pretty colours in there. And then probably my favourite of all of them, which I've just finished off with, well, I say finished. I finished in the book doing it set by set. And there's some of my all-time favourites in here, but also as a set that just really pleases me. Lots of sort of grey tones, which, as you'll know, I love. So what I've also been doing, as I've been painting them as sets, is putting them onto individual tags. I think you can probably see those lined up down the sides here, so that I could then eventually put them all back in a rainbow order. So what I decided to share with you is the very final stages, after having done them as sets, of just putting these last 12 colours onto my individual tags, which I hand cut. I've edged them a little bit with some frayed burlap. There's even a little spatter on those just to create a bit more interest. And I'm just going to take you through what I've been doing on each of these individual tags, which is to have a look at the pencil just as pencil, to then use a water brush on it, and then to do dipping of the pencil and applying direct with water. So without any further ado, let's get on with that. I'm using a Pentel water brush. I've got a little jar of water just here. This is cut from some fairly cheap sketchbook watercolor paper, these tags, and as I say, I just measured them out and cut as many as I could from each page. I think it was 24 per page I worked out, and that would give me the 72 tags I needed. If you need to know measurements, oh, go on then. The measurements are, they're 3 inches long by 1.5 inches wide, and that was out of an A4 piece of watercolour sketchbook paper. So the delight of these is that they are really flexible tools that you can use, as you can already see here, in a number of ways. I also like that you can use the shavings. There's no wood wrapped around here. This is just paper around completely solid pigment. So you're getting a lot of pigment for your money as you go through these. So let's play so that you can see what I'm doing. I forgot, of course, there's a 4th method of using these on here, which is just to use them for line as well, which of course you can do. So I've just been putting a little squiggle of C's on each one. And this is Lumberjack Plaid. So this is a full-on, deep, cool red, which, as you know, I love. So I've just been starting at this end with a scribble. I start quite heavy-handed, putting down a lot of pigment, and then just pull away to a much lighter pressure. And then we get another of those in the middle, which I'm going to use the water brush on in a moment. And I quite like that to be slightly longer so that we can see the paint playing. And you'll see what happens in a moment when I apply the water. And then I just dipping the pencil straight in here and giving the chance for the pigment to just interact with the water. So I tend to give it a little moment on the mat before applying direct to the paper. And you can see that gives you right away a really luscious kind of full-on watery application of that pigment. So I'll just, well, actually, let's finish with the watercolour brush one. What you do need around is a cloth. I'm using some paper towel just because that's going to make my life easier for now. And then with the water brush, just with a little squeeze of water, I'm just going to move this pigment. And one thing that I think is really great about these watercolour pencils, compared to lots that I've used, is how beautifully they pick up off the paper when you blend with the water without leaving pencil marks, which is really exciting. So cleaning off the brush, cleaning off that bit of watery pigment on there. Obviously, if I were painting now, I would use that because you can just pick that up with the brush and paint with it. So that, you can see, gives you the pencil with line, the pencil just scribbled, which is a really lovely application, scribbled and then with water from the water brush, and applied direct with the pencil just dipped in some water. So I'm going to carry on through these and I'll talk a bit as I go. Do we want to leave that down there? Just where it is. So that was Lumberjack Plaid. Here is Abandoned Coral. So again, I'm going to start with line, just a few little C's or waves at the top of the C. Nice thick application, lighter, lighter, lighter. And the pinks in this set, you'll know if you follow me that I don't use pink a heck of a lot, except of course when it comes to summer and florals. And I think the pinks in this set are going to be lovely for roses. You can see probably that the Lumberjack Plaid here is still damp on the nib, and that pigment is very willing to spread itself. But these are like any watercolor pigment. If you use watercolors, you'll know that there are some colors and tones that are just really happy to leap off the palette when you re-wet them and get into action. And there are others that need just a little more coaxing, a little more love and attention. Quite often a little more water is the key. And they just need a bit more time to allow themselves to come. And it's just the same with the watercolour pencils. So at the red end of things, the Lumberjack Plaid, the pigment will leap around really happily, come off the pencil really easily. But you'll see as we go through this, there are others that just need a bit more of your time and love and care. Let's pop that one up there. Spun Sugar, another really pretty pink. I'm starting at this end because I'm saving my favourites for last. On the page in the journal, I started with some of my favourites, the blues, greens, greys, purples. So I'm doing it in reverse order this time, just to have a different take on things. So here's the Spun Sugar, lovely delicate kind of pink. But if you press nice and hard, you can still get a lot of pigment down onto the page for a really nice sort of, I want to say candy floss pink, because that's kind of what it reminds me of. Anybody who's cotton candy, I think, if you're watching from the States, is what I'm talking about. Candy floss in the UK. There we go. So you can see I'm just kind of working it on the mat, and that's just allowing, I think you can probably see if I can get the camera to focus on what I'm pointing at, that allows the pigment in the pencil stick to just soften in the water, to interact with that water, which means that then you can get that application down onto the page. And it's also quite good if you use the side of the pencil. You'll also find that you're leaving fewer marks, if marks are a problem. And then finally, I sort of leave this bit till last because it's my favourite thing to do, is to allow the magic of that application of water to move that pigment on the page. And the delicate pink at that end is just a treat. I say I don't use pink much, but it's definitely growing on me. So that's the spun sugar on its little tag. And you can see I've moved these into a sort of temporary rainbow order, but I'm going to have to insert them in the other colours. And what's been really useful about having these tags is I've got the colours all really next to each other, so that I can really see if that's what I want to have next to the other ones in my palette. The other thing that's kind of surprised me about these pencils is there are, of the ink pads and sprays and oxides that I've got, and yes, I do have a lot of Distress inks. I've been collecting them for a long time. I love them. I use them all the time. So yes, I have built my collection, and when the pencils came, I knew I would want to be using those. The thing that has sort of surprised me is there are colours, go-to colours. You've already noticed that if you've watched several videos here, or if you follow me on Instagram, that I come back to time and time and time again. And there are other colours that come out very, very rarely in terms of ink pads and sprays. They do get used, but they don't get to come out and play nearly as often as my favourites. And going through these pencils and just playing, seeing the colours come to life, I've been really surprised to find that there are ones that I've ignored as ink pads that have really gone, ooh, in my brain as I've applied them to the tags or to the journal swatches, that have really made me reconsider. And they're not, that's partly because, here's another thing about the Distress crayons. If you've used a lot of Distress pencils, Distress crayons are a whole other thing, and we can look at those another time if you're interested. Let me know in the comments. The thing with the Distress pencils is, because the pigment is a solid pigment, not all of the tones are exactly the same as the tones you get in the ink pads. They're clearly related. I mean, this is dried marigold, and this is one of the colours, this is why I'm talking about this now, that has made me kind of go, why don't I play with this more often? Because it's this lovely, delicate, peachy pink, which for summer flowers and things is going to be just delicious. So yeah, to finally finish that sentence, one of the things that has surprised me going through these colours is colours I have neglected or ignored or thought I really didn't like very much have gone, oh, use me in pencil form. So here's brushed corduroy, and here, this is another example. Brushed corduroy, I almost never pick up the ink pad. Very occasionally these sort of yellowy browns come into view in a landscape or autumn leaves. But I suddenly look at it and think, wow, that's a really useful colour, that yellow tone without being full on yellow. Here I am, I've dipped it in the water. I'm just, again, creating that sense of interaction between the water and the pigment to just let it soften, so that when I then apply it to the page direct, you get that lovely juicy effect. And again, here's one of the ones that is maybe less willing to come down. I've found that you can sometimes sort of just allow the pigment to run down the nib onto the page, and it's not about pressing harder, it's actually about pressing more lightly, so that that pigment can just almost come off the nib because it chooses to, as opposed to because I'm making it. Sorry about the finger getting in the light there, but I'm just trying to get the side of the nib to the page. There we are. The side of the nib is now nicely softened. So that colour is coming off beautifully. And then the final stage is, let's just move this central one along. And just look how that blend just picks up off the paper. No pencil marks. Just delicious. And you can see it goes from that nice sort of deep brownish yellow to where it's lightly pigmented, plenty of water in the mix. You get a really beautiful gold. So when I originally looked at this set, and I sort of, even just looking at the pencils, I knew it was going to be one of my favourites, if not my true favourite, and it is. I sort of thought, well, this one, they haven't quite got the rainbow going on. They haven't quite got the mixing palette of a primary-ish yellow, blue and red, which of course enables you to mix up all the others. If you look at something like set 2, set 1 and set 2 and set 3, there's a very clear rainbow going on with some very clear red, yellow, blue that's going to enable you to mix up. And I looked at these and I thought, well, they haven't really done that so much with this one. I don't object. I love these colours. But actually, as I was swatching them into the journal, I found that with that brushed corduroy, which has that really yellow tone, and of course with the lumberjack plaid, which is a really beautiful, cool red, and then further on up here, you've got blueprint sketch, you actually really have got very good mixing colours, even in this set. If I could only buy one set, for me, it would definitely be set 6, this one that I'm swatching at the moment. Just because these colours appeal to my love of grey tones, to my love of cool tones. I'm sure you will have other preferences, because colour is such a personal thing. Something I've really noticed over time is how we respond to colour, the colours we return to, the palettes that make our hearts sing. It's a real journey to discover the colours that are part of you, the colours that really make you feel at home, or make you feel alive, or whatever it might be, however you want to talk about it. That I do resonate when I see other people working with brights. Absolutely. I love seeing full-on oranges, reds, yellows, pinks just dancing across other people's projects. But when I use them, it feels like it's a long way from me. I can still absolutely love the results, but it doesn't feel like home, I guess, is one way of putting it. That's Forest Moss, which is another colour that in terms of an ink pad rarely comes out to play. But look what a brilliant kind of forest green. I've been taking lots of walks as the spring weather comes out, and excuse me, here in the countryside in the Czech Republic, we've got mixed woods, lots and lots of fir trees, obviously, but also deciduous, many silver birch, which I love. And one of the things I really love is the white trunk of the silver birch against the pine trees, against the evergreens. And that forest moss is going to have to become part of my world, because that plus the pine needles, which is somewhere over here, gives you the perfect pine tree. Bundle sage, long-time favourite as an ink, is a favourite as a pencil as well, no question. It's a beautiful grey-green, and again, you can go from a really heavy pigmentation there with good pressure to a really deliciously just light wash of colour. You can see as I'm going back over, I'm just kind of increasing the pressure in the middle, layering up some more pigment. And then let's go for a dip. I'm cleaning up this dip each time, you'll notice, with the paper towel, so that I can come down with the new colour and not get them all mixed up. And then a direct application of that watery pigment to the paper. That's just a lovely grey-green. Just a very happy place for me. It's got a bit more depth to it than the ink pad version of Bundled Sage. It's got a little more presence, and I really like that. So that will mean if you're combining your mediums, you can have the real subtlety of the inky Bundled Sage, and then you could layer some of this lovely pencil pigment over the top to just intensify areas, to create shadow, to create depth and shading. I need a bit more water coming through the water brush because that's not quite blending as it has, and that's the fault of the water, not the fault of the pigment. There we go. So that's Bundled Sage. I don't mind that the pencil's kind of gone down there, but I might lighten it a little bit. You can also pick up, look at that, add a little water, press down some paper towel or a cloth, and you can pick up the pigment again and just tidy up around the edges. So that one's going there, nearly there. And we're coming on to the top favourites now. Grey. There we are. I suspect I'm in a minority when I say that grey is one of my favourite colours. But it's not just about grey, it's about grey tones of other things. That's why I chose to spatter these tags with some, was it hickory smoke or pumice stone? I forget. I think it might have been hickory smoke actually this time. Usually it's pumice stone, just to create a look of sort of slightly aged paper. Lost Shadow is one of the most recent greys, and it's a beauty. It's a lovely sort of cool to mid grey, I would say, as opposed to pumice stone, which is very warm, hickory smoke, which is quite cool. Although again, less so in pencil form. It's got a little more warmth to it. So Lost Shadow is really your true cool grey in Distress Watercolour pencil form. Let's pop a bit of that down there. And that, I mean, some of these pigments, when you do the direct water application, become more luscious and more juicy. And some of them become just so delicate and misty. That's Lost Shadow doing beautiful work there. Where's my watercolour pencil brush? Here we go. And then let's just pull that colour across the page. And it really does become a whisper of a colour. A ghostly presence, Lost Shadow. And again, I might just pick up the edge of that. Careful, because I've got red pigment on this bit of paper towel. And red likes to get everywhere. I'm just going to clean the brush tip, put down a bit of water where it's gone over the edge where I don't want it, and then pick it up with the paper towel. So that's my Lost Shadow. Just wipe that up a bit. Clean this again. And you can see how strongly pigmented these are, because they are leaving marks on the track here. That's the pigment from when I was swatching before. Broken China, one of the originals, one of the earliest distress colours, and a favourite for very good reason. It's a beautiful turquoise shade in the ink. It's, I would say, slightly cooler in pencil form, slightly less green to it. I don't mind at all, because we've got oodles of other turquoises that you could then mix with this, blend with this. We can do some mixing and blending of these Distress Watercolour Pencils if that's something you would like to see, either in one of the weekly few minutes of fun videos, or we could come back and do some full-on Sunday swatching, mixing these Distress Watercolour Pencils with one another and seeing what we've got. But Broken China is an old favourite for a reason. It's just a beautiful tone. And again, for me, it's because it's got that slightly cool, greyish presence. Just makes me happy. I don't know why I like operating at the cool end of colour palettes. It's taste, isn't it? It's the resonances that a colour calls up for you. It's probably goes so far back that one can't pull it apart. But they're the tones that somehow work for me. I'm just thinking, I'm just making connections. I also really like sad music. I like music in minor keys. I listen to sad music when I'm sad. I listen to sad music quite often when I'm happy. So maybe there's just a twist of melancholy somewhere deep in my soul. That is why those things speak to me. There we are. So line, scribble, washed with a brush, direct application of the dipped pencil. Into the final three. Stormy Sky might be my most used ink pad, I think, along with Pumice Stone probably. And again, it's just a delight to meet it in a new formulation and sort of see that it has a whole new life in the form of Distress Watercolour Pencil. Again, it's a slightly different shade, and this time I would say this one is slightly greener than the ink as it comes on the pad. But I love its presence. It's got a sort of ocean grey to it. I can imagine this really serving your turn for ocean landscapes, for sea moods. And that's sort of how I've often used it, is for those summer skies that are just clouding over. That's how I've used the ink pad in the past. And so I can see that this, as a way of adding depth to those backgrounds, as a way of adding a slightly stormier look. But look at that application direct with the dipped water. It's a beautiful thing. Whereas, yeah, in there, very good. And then let's pull the colour across. And as I say, it's slightly making my head hurt to be wiping up this pigment off the mat here, because that is just perfect for picking up and painting with. You could, oh, sorry, I'm just taking a moment to enjoy what happened at the pale end of that Stormy Sky wash. Just a beautiful, beautiful gradation through there. And you can see there's not a sign of a pencil mark through the middle there. That colour picks up just beautifully. So as I say, you could just pick up this and paint with it. It's there and it's ready to play with. And I know that there's also the option. Sorry, I'm getting distracted by leaves all of a sudden. There's also the option. Ah, that's what I started to say hours ago. Because this is solid pigment through here, you sharpen them with a pencil sharpener. Don't throw away the shavings, because when you sharpen this to get yourself a point, if you like to work with a point, those shavings that are ending up on the mat are pure pigment. So you can pop those into a little palette or onto a saucer, activate them with some water, and as I was just doing off the mat there, you can just paint with those. So many options for how you play with these. This is Blueprint Sketch, a colour I was obsessed with at the point when it came out and used a lot, mixing it with my greys, mixing it with browns, just a fabulous colour. And then I sort of forgot about it. You know how new things come along and you're playing with other colours. This has reminded me that I must get the Blueprint Sketch out again, because it's got a real vibrancy to it as a colour, but it also somehow manages to have a softness, like a sort of deep lavender tone. I have actually used it in the past to paint lavender, and it's beautiful for that. So just watch what happens as I shade this one out. I'm going to take some pigment off there actually, because I've got quite a lot of pigment on the card, and I want to make sure I get a properly pale version of it at this end. So if you're finding there's lots and lots of pigment around, which there is with Blueprint Sketch, I'm just wiping off the brush so that I get a more watery mix at this end, and then I can just drive the colour back in that direction. And that lovely delicate tone right at the very end, as I say, is perfect for a little lavender stem. Pop it back up here. Little lavender stem, just very simply constructed. And then the reason you might want fine line, of course, is that you can just apply the stem of the lavender right down the middle with a very fine line. You've got control of that. And then with some more of that pigment just added to the mat, clean off the brush tip because it's full of Blueprint Sketch. Did you see how much pigment there was there? Just pick up some of that and you can create your lavender branches a bit further down. So you can see there's a real subtlety to how these can work, or you can have really full-on pigment. That was all by way of procrastination, because we've come to the final colour from this set. This is Dusty Concord. Again, this goes way back in Distress ink time as a colour. It was one of the very first ones I owned as an ink pad. Long time ago. So again, the firm pressure to get the lots of pigment, or you can just go over and add some more. I'm really picking up off the paper to get that lighter end, and then I can go back and add some more. Really firm pressure at that end to get lots of pigment off the pencil. And let's take that for a little dip in the water. Let it just amalgamate a little bit. This was one of the ones that when I was swatching in the journal, just seemed to need a little bit more coaxing, a little bit more love and attention to get that pigment to really soften in the water. But that may have been because it was the very first time I was using it. It seems a lot more willing to come out and play now, which is lovely. And that's one of the ones where you can see, as opposed to a richer colour, it's really a lovely soft application on that direct to paper dipped pencil. And again, it just picks up beautifully to create that gradation in our centre one. Those marks are paintbrush marks, not pencil marks. That's the tip of this brush not being very wet enough, really. So that's the Dusty Concord, the line, the scribble, the wash, and the direct paper application. So my task now is going to be to insert these 12 colours into the big rainbow going on over here. And then I'll be able to insert these pencils into their place in this run. Because the boxes hold 12, 6 12s are 72, so that holds the 72 colours, not the picket fence. Because scorched timber came as an extra colour, because picket fence is not really a colour as such, white is a highlight. I keep my picket fence ready and waiting on the desk because I use it a lot. So the colours will all go into the tins when I've worked out what's going where, and the white will just always be on hand. But I love this final set. I think this is, as a set, just a really pretty palette to play with. So I hope that's given you both some insight into using the Distress Watercolor Pencils. I hope it's given you a bit of insight into swatching up big sets and working out what goes where. And it's probably given you a bit of insight into my colour soul of cool tones and so on and so forth. So thank you for watching. If you've made it this far, I'm thrilled to have had your company. I'd be delighted if you leave a comment. Tell me which is your favourite Distress Watercolour pencil set. Tell me if you've encountered issues with them, because I hope some of what I've suggested today will help you get this pigment down onto the paper. As you can see, the range of colours is just a treat. And if you'd like to see some mixing of these colours in the future, if you'd like to spend a bit more time with the Distress Watercolour Pencils, seeing how they mix and blend, maybe painting up some botanicals, stamps, that might be something for a few minutes of fun one of these days. Thank you so much for watching. Do leave a comment if you have something to say. Subscribe if you haven't already and you've enjoyed what happened here today. And if you can hit the thumbs up button, that all helps to grow the channel and enable me to share more monthly Sunday swatchings and more weekly few minutes of fun. Happy crafting all.